Look, if you've ever felt completely down to your bones exhausted by the demands of raising a child, or if you just look at modern families and think, why is this so incredibly hard right now? Well, you're exactly where you need to be. Today, we're diving into the real reason modern parenting feels practically impossible, and we're doing it by looking at the science of human evolution. Because honestly, the way we raise kids today, often totally alone, stressed out, and running on fumes, is completely alien compared to our biological past.
So let's just jump right in. If you were born in the last 100 years or so, there's a very good chance that the way you were raised, and maybe the way you're raising your own kids right now, is part of literally the loneliest parenting experiment in human history. And hey, let's be super clear. It is not because parents today don't love their kids, and it's definitely not for lack of trying. It's because for the very first time in human existence, the people responsible for raising children are doing it almost entirely by themselves. And the damage this isolation has caused to the kids, to the parents, to human development as a whole is something science is really just starting to measure.
Now here's the crucial takeaway. For 99% of human history, no parent ever raised a child alone. Not once. And I'm not just being philosophical here. This is a hard biological fact. For almost the entire time our species has been walking this planet, raising kids was an intensely communal, all-hands-on-deck kind of deal. So why exactly did we evolve that way?
Well, it all comes down to basic biology. Think about it like this. A baby horse can stand up and run around on its literal first day of life. But a human infant, it is without a doubt the most dependent, helpless, and developmentally demanding creature evolution ever came up with. I mean, a human baby can't walk, can't feed itself, can't even regulate its own body temperature, right? It can't survive a single hour without direct care. And this massive dependency doesn't just last a few weeks, it lasts for years. They need constant teaching, protection, and emotional modeling. Biologically speaking, one single adult physically cannot provide all of that. It is literally impossible.
But because of that intense dependency, our ancestors evolved this absolutely brilliant biological workaround. It's called alloparenting. Allo basically just means other. So your ancient ancestors raised their kids in alloparenting systems. And we're not talking about occasional babysitters here, or a neighbor stepping in for an hour so mom could finally take a nap. No, we're talking about fully invested co-parents, other adults and community members who shared the daily physical sweat equity labor of raising every single child in the group. They fed them, taught them, held them. It was just part of their fundamental biological job description.
And this wasn't just some fun, quirky cultural trend to make life a little easier. It's hard science. Take anthropologist Sarah Hrdy over at UC Davis. She spent decades showing that relying on a village was the vital biological infrastructure that made human development even possible in the first place. You know why human kids take years longer to develop than any other primate? It's precisely because evolution basically banked on multiple caregivers being there. The human timeline just was not designed for two parents. It was designed for a village.
The contrast between that ancient past and our present day is honestly pretty staggering. Biologically, we are totally wired for a crowded reality, bathed in this constant communal support where everybody pitches in. But modern life, it's forced us into something vastly different. We're isolated in these quiet suburbs. A child today is often raised by just one or two people, separated from extended family, surrounded by neighbors they might not even know. We outsource a huge chunk of a kid's waking hours to paid professionals and then hand that child back to two exhausted parents who are somehow expected to magically be everything that an entire ancient village used to be.
And so when those two people inevitably struggle, when they feel like they are drowning under the weight of an entire village, modern culture basically tells them they're failing. But if you are an exhausted parent listening to this right now, I really need you to hear this loud and clear. Absolutely nothing is wrong with you. The experiment is what's wrong. Two people were never, ever supposed to do this alone.
And the impact of this missing village, it's incredibly measurable. The data shows that when kids are raised with multiple invested adult caregivers, think grandparents, aunts, really close family friends, their brains just function differently. They have measurably stronger emotional regulation, their social intelligence is higher, they even show lower rates of anxiety and depression and way greater cognitive flexibility compared to kids raised in strictly isolated nuclear families. So, you might be wondering, why do we see such drastically better outcomes when there are more adults around? Well, it's because a human brain isn't born finished. Actually, it's born massively unfinished, way more so than any other primate. That developmental process actively needs environmental input to finish itself. The brain is literally in there building its own neural pathways in real time, responding directly to the social environment around it. It's an absolutely incredible feat of biology when you think about it.
And here's the kicker. The specific social environment your brain was biologically designed to build itself inside of It wasn't a quiet, isolated two-parent house. It was a living, breathing, noisy web of 15 to 30 different humans. A child raised inside a dense web like that gets dozens of different emotional textures, right? Different behavioral models, different voices, completely different ways of solving problems and expressing love. A child raised by just two isolated adults is only getting a tiny fraction of that vital developmental input.
The famous psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner once said that every child needs at least one adult who is irrationally devoted to them. But he actually clarified later that a developing brain biologically expects to find several people providing that devoted social scaffolding, not just one or two parents frantically trying to do the whole shebang themselves, but multiple adults, with each one bringing their own uniquely different layer of support. But hey, it is not just the kids who suffer when that scaffolding is gone. Parental burnout? That is a completely modern epidemic. The absolute physical and emotional depletion that comes from being solely responsible for keeping a tiny human alive and developing that barely even existed in traditional cultures. And that's not because ancient parents loved their kids any less, but simply because they were never asked to carry the entire weight of that child's survival completely by themselves.
Just imagine a traditional Hadza mother nursing an infant. She isn't sitting in a quiet room alone. She's surrounded by other women. There are grandmothers taking the baby for hours at a time, older kids who just treat infant care as a totally normal part of their day. The weight is naturally distributed. It's exactly like how carrying a massive piece of heavy furniture is easy if you've got 10 hands helping you. But today, the modern parent is basically trying to carry that exact same evolutionary weight completely by themselves. Which brings us to a really crucial point. This specific, deep-seated loneliness of being wholly responsible for a child while feeling totally unsupported, you can't fix it by reading more. No amount of parenting books or pediatric visits or late-night desperate doom scrolling on mommy blogs is going to cure it, because all of that is just information. What modern parents are actually starving for is presence. Physical, invested human presence. The exact kind of presence the village used to provide on autopilot. So what exactly did that ancient automatic presence actually give us? Well, primarily three big things. First, it gave kids constant, real-world immersion. Kids weren't bored. They were actively living in a community, watching and helping with real tasks. Second, it provided super diverse templates for emotional regulation. They got to watch dozens of different adults handle grief and anger and joy, which is arguably the most important skill a human can learn. And third, perhaps most importantly, it gave them unconditional belonging. Let's zoom in on that last piece for a second. Unconditional belonging. In the village, a child wasn't just a visitor. They were a genuinely needed member of the group. People would deeply miss them if they were gone. Developmental psychologists now recognize that this specific feeling of belonging is a fundamental requirement for the human psyche. It is literally as essential to healthy development as food and sleep. And it's something that modern adults, trapped in their own isolated nuclear households, are desperately craving just as much as the kids are.
What's really fascinating is that you can actually feel the ghosts of that lost village in the way we behave every single day. It's exactly why teenagers form such intense, desperate attachments to their friend groups. It's why new parents instinctively ache to have their own parents live closer. It's why we find tight-knit, walkable neighborhoods so magnetically appealing. And it is 100% why online parenting communities just explode with engagement. It's literally millions of isolated parents reaching out through a screen, desperately looking for the village that used to just be sitting outside their front door.
So, to wrap up the biological reality of this explainer, the village was never just a luxury our ancestors had that we somehow outgrew. The village was the system. Our current setup, the isolated nuclear family, is the anomaly. It's the experiment. And frankly, the results of that experiment are glaringly obvious when you look at the mental health data of the kids and parents living inside it today.
Now, obviously, acknowledging all this doesn't mean the fix is simple. The world that created that ancient village is largely gone in most places. It's been dismantled by industrialization, urbanization, and massive economic systems that scatter families all across the globe. We have to be realistic here. You can't just snap your fingers and rebuild the ancient village by tomorrow morning.
But understanding this really does change everything. Once you realize what our brains were biologically built to expect, you can finally stop blaming yourself for finding parenting so impossibly hard. You're not failing. You were just handed a job that was designed for a whole community. And knowing that means you can start making deliberate choices. You can proactively find ways to bring more invested adult presence back in your kids' lives and more communal support into your own.
Which leaves us with one vital final question to take away, and I really want you to chew on this. The ancient, biological village might be gone, scattered by modern life. But looking around your world today, Who will you deliberately invite into yours?